Welcome back. We're discussing the big takeaways from the inaugural 2+2 dialogue. Ambassador Tim Roma, Alyssa Iris and Kamal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, they continue to be with us. Ambassador Roma, if I can ask you about the discussions on trade. Yes, there was a significant paragraph on balancing trade, also improving market access. But do you really see India getting any concessions from those tariffs on aluminium and steel?
Well, I want to go back, first of all, to something that you asked about previously, both on Iran and on Pakistan. The waiver with respect to Iran, there is a previous precedent that I worked on when I lived in India under the Obama administration as U.S. ambassador, when we didn't go into India and pound the table and demand certain quotas and outcomes on reducing the oil due to the sanctions on non-proliferation, a goal India shares with the United States. We worked very quietly and diplomatically with the Indians and asked them, how can we help you do this? How can we help reduce this oil coming in from Iran from 16, 17, 18% down to half of that, 9 or 8%. How can we provide new technologies and new trade? How can this be a win-win scenario? How do we not elevate this too much diplomatically to get India into, regional, issues that would be embarrassing to them? And it worked out, and it worked out well. So there is a path, and there is a resolution on this Iranian issue. Back to something about Pakistan before. I would disagree respectfully with Ambassador Sibal. The United States, over the last 10 years, has dramatically changed its relationship with Pakistan and put more and more and more pressure on them with aid, military aid, suspension of different activities, to tell them directly they better do more about terrorism within their country and supporting terrorism in other places. And the Indian governments, both governments in the last 10 years, I think have recognized that change in that relationship. We need to continue to do more there. On trade, this is a sensitive issue. It's not going to be worked out in one set of talks on 2+2. That's why these 2+2 talks need to be more often. They need to be expanded with our Commerce Secretary and U.S. trade representatives. These are very difficult political issues. In fact, I would say the Indians do need to show some more flexibility on access to markets, not just on the defense side, but on the agricultural side, on the pharmaceutical, and on the medical side. There are lots of ways that we need to try to diplomatically resolve this issue without escalating this into the inflammatory rhetoric that Mr. Trump uses sometimes with China. I think we can work these things through. I think the fact that that we're not talking about a Trans-Pacific Partnership anymore, maybe there's a possible free trade agreement that the United States and India can work out in a modest way in the future that will set a trend for a win-win trade relationship moving forward in the next few years. This is a very difficult issue to resolve.
Okay, difficult trade is a difficult issue to resolve, but Ambassador Sibal, if I can come to you, when you're talking about market access for U.S. companies, do you get a sense that despite what happened today, India will have to do more to give access to U.S. companies? India today conveyed that we will be importers of up to $2.5 billion worth of oil and gas from the United States. So please acknowledge that. But do you think we'll have to do more to reduce the trade deficit and make sure we somehow get those concessions from aluminium and steel tariffs?
I don't think aluminium and steel tariffs are that important in the overall context of our trade relations. I think it is a U.S. threat to review the GSP, which is problematic. But even if at the end of the day the United States did that, we would be able to live with it. But the whole approach is that of arm twisting, that we have these 6 issues or whatever, the number of issues on the table. You have to satisfy us on all these issues before we move forward, and this should be reduced into a document in which there are clear understandings that you will meet these demands of the United States within certain timelines, and on their side they will then give you assurance about GSP benefits. So but this is arm twisting, and the President of the United States has been doing it with other countries. Now, if the logic is that America must have a trade surplus with every other country, then what does every other country do? I mean, India is a trade deficit country.
Okay.
And if you are going to have one-to-one trade balance with every country, then I think the whole economic system, global economic system, can't work. But we know what President Trump's obsession is.
We're running out of time. I'm going to quickly get in. I'm going to quickly go across to Alyssa as well. Alyssa, on the S-400, the government is saying that this word was not mentioned today, but yes, we conveyed that we are heavily dependent on Russian defense systems. Do you really see a waiver coming by in the days and weeks to come?
I would hope,
and also
in this
to couple it with the COMCASA, will there be complications with the COMCASA and the S-400 air defense system?
No, I don't believe that those introduce a complication in and of themselves. On the issue of the S-400, I would hope that in the days and weeks to come, that President Trump does indeed decide to exercise his ability to provide a waiver. In this case, it's a very specific case of a platform that India has been negotiating with Russia for several years. So it didn't just happen overnight. And I think, as Secretary Mattis has said quite publicly, we really want to make sure that we are continuing to deepen our defense relationship with India. And a way not to do that is to suddenly impose some kind of sanctions over something that India has been working on for many years. So as a principle of being a good partner, I do hope that the president decides indeed to exercise that waiver authority. The COMCASA accomplishment is a nice accomplishment, and that should really open up the ability for India to upgrade its communications platforms for defense equipment that's already purchased from the United States, like aircraft, for example. And that will really create the way for India and the United States to have real-time, deeper operational coordination. And that will be important. That is really going to be helpful to both countries. So for India, that's also a big win.
Okay, it's a big win for India. Ambassador Roma, final comments. I just have about 10 seconds. Do you think now, after the 2+2, India will seriously have to think on how to balance its relationship with Russia and China? How would these two countries be looking at the 2+2?
Well, I think, first of all, I would agree that while there's a lot of sensitivity in our Congress, Democrats and Republicans, about a waiver on the S-400 for Russia, many of us that understand the strategic implications of this will hope President Trump will extend the waiver, recognizing that India has a long history of sales with Russia. They're moving more and more toward the United States. We want to encourage that, but we don't want to push India closer to a China axis relationship, either commercially or geopolitically. I think China is going to be paying very careful attention to every word in the joint statement, every article on this. The United States and India are moving closer and closer on our strategic issues in the Indo-Pacific region. I think China recognizes that. We have had things in the joint statement before about we're both concerned about China's aggressiveness in the South China Sea and expanding that in other regions of the world. And I think Russia pays attention to this as well, too. Mr. Putin is very sensitive and aware to relationships around the world. And look, at the end of the day, the United States wants to have good relationships with everybody, but this important strategic 21st century defining relationship with India should be a key priority for the Trump administration every single day of the week.
And I'm sure our diplomats in India would be very worried because Prime Minister Modi would be meeting President Putin later in the year, and they will somehow have to balance that relationship, and there should be some key takeaways from that bilateral meeting as well. So I'm sure our diplomats would be weighing in on that. Ambassador Roma, Alyssa Iris, and Ambassador Sybil, thank you very much for speaking to CNBC TV 18.